Hello everyone, this is the Eloquent Peasant and I'd like to welcome you to another video. This is the second video in the series of personal piety that I was looking at, specifically featuring the individual known as Neferabu, who was a workman from Deir el-Medina who worked there under the reign of Ramesses II, so we're talking about the 19th dynasty. For a few more details on him, go back and watch the first video. You can find it easily in the channel, or if you click on this little floaty linky thing here, that'll take you straight back to it. So go and watch that before this, it'll give you a little bit more context because we're going to dive straight in. So the first video with Neferabu that we looked at was personal piety stela. So personal piety is the idea and the concept that human beings can have a direct connection with a god. They didn't have to go through an intermediary. So in the case of the first stela, Neferabu took the name of Ptah in vain, and Ptah caused him to see darkness by day. And he basically got in touch with the god and said, "Can you relieve me of this pain?" I'm apologized for it, and the god, gave him his sight back, possibly, if that's exactly what it means. It's not entirely sure. In this stela we see Neferabu again, but this time he has transgressed against Meretseger. Meretseger was a snake goddess who was thought to inhabit the huge pyramid-shaped hill above the village of Deir el-Medina in the Valley of the Kings in the Theban necropolis. If you've ever been there, you can't miss it. It's one of the most dominating aspects of the landscape down there, and it was thought that Meretseger inhabited that hill. Now Meretseger, along with Ptah, was one of the major gods of Deir el-Medina, and it was thought that the workers worshipped Meretseger because of the working conditions. Essentially, they were working digging out the tombs of the kings and the queens. There was lots of risk of collapse, of landslides, and so to make sure that you were working in a safe environment, you would do your best to appease the goddess. There were chapels, small chapels to Meretseger and Ptah, which is probably where this stela was found. It's not 100% sure from the archaeological record the find location of this stela, but there are the chapels dedicated to Meretseger on the pathway which leads from the village to the Valley of the Queens. So it may have been found there. The stela is shaped quite unusually. It's really low and rectangular, and as you can see from the image, Meretseger is on the right facing to the left, and this is usually the reverse way round. Usually the divine, the god or the divine person, the king, is usually found on the left, and the person giving praise is on the right, but here it's the other way round. It may have something to do with the location. It may have been, made in this shape and in this way to fit in a certain part of the chapel, but again, without the find location, it's not entirely clear. The accession number for this stela it's from the Turin Museum, so it's Turin number 50058 if you want to go and look at that in any more detail. And we're just going to go ahead with the translation and go into some more details afterwards. Meretseger, Lady of the Sky, Mistress of the Two Lands, her good name is Peak of the West. Giving praise to the Peak of the West, kissing the ground for her car. Let me give praises, hear my appeal, for I am one truthful upon earth, made by the servant in the place of truth, Neferabu, true of voice. I was an ignorant man, senseless, who did not know good from bad. I did the act of transgression against the peak, and she taught me a lesson. I was in her hand by night as by day. I sat on bricks like the pregnant woman. I called out for breath, but it did not come to me. I libated to the Peak of the West, great of strength, and to every god and goddess. Now look, I shall say to the great and the small who are in the gang, beware of the peak, for there is a lion in her. The peak strikes with the stroke of a savage lion. She is after the one who transgresses against her. I called to my mistress, and I found her coming to me as a sweet breeze. She was merciful to me, having made me see her hand. She returned to me appeased. She made me forget the sickness which was in my heart, for the Peak of the West is appeased if one calls to her. Spoken by Neferabu, true of voice. He says, "Look, let hear every ear that lives upon earth. Beware the Peak of the West." So that was the translation of the stela. Just a few little things to point out and just to get you thinking about them. What actually did Neferabu do? You know, he doesn't actually say what the transgression was. We know that it's bad because he says, you know, he did the transgression against her and she taught him a lesson. He doesn't actually say what that transgression is, whether it was taking her name in vain or something a bit worse than that. What we do know is the actual physical ailments that he suffered for this transgression, and he gives it like the metaphor of a woman giving birth. In Egypt, the women would squat essentially over a birthing brick, and here is really kind of visual about that. You know, he says he was sat on bricks like the pregnant woman, and he called out for breath, but it didn't come to him. And if you've ever seen the beautiful image of a woman giving birth, you'll kind of know exactly what pain that he's going through. Maybe we'll talk about that in a future video, childbirth in ancient Egypt. So basically, yeah, he's saying that he was going through this pain. He's very specific. He libated to not only Meretseger but to every god and goddess. He was pretty desperate to get out of this pain, and he's saying that she had like the strength of a lion in her. She is really savage, but because of this libation and because he kind of gave his apology, she came to him as a sweet breeze. And again, this is something that's a metaphor that's used throughout Egyptian literature and religious kind of iconography. This thought of the god coming to you as a sweet breeze. It's a really nice metaphor, really. It's it's just a nice way of phrasing something like that. Also, as well, Meretseger's iconography. If you look back to the stela that I put up in this presentation while I was describing Meretseger and the peak, she's shown typically in either a purely snake form or with a snake's body with a human head. But here she has a vulture's head, a snake's head, as well as a human head. This might have some kind of aspect of the two ladies. So the vulture goddess Nekhbet and the cobra goddess Wajet. It may be something like that in there, along with the human head as well. There may be some divinity in there. It's not entirely sure, but it's kind of interesting that she's got these three heads here. And the whole snake aspect. Snakes were believed to be able to come in and out of the underworld. This is probably due to, again, the Egyptians witnessing snakes disappearing into rocks and then emerging at night time. So, the snake could disappear and come out, which was probably how they thought Meretseger was as well. She inhabited this peak during the day, but at night, she could come out and interact with people. So it's a really interesting stela, and again, it just shows the connection of personal piety with individuals, that by transgressing against a god, you can essentially ask their forgiveness by libating to them, by erecting a stela, by giving out warnings to other members of the gang. I mean, remember, he says here, I'm giving out a warning here to the big and the small members of the crew, the Iset, the crew of the gang. These are the specific people of Deir al-Medina. So he's given a specific warning to all of those, like, don't do what I did because this is what will happen. So a really interesting stela there. I'll touch again a bit more on personal piety in a future video. We're going to probably change it around a little bit. I might do something Old Kingdomy for the next one. But thanks for tuning in. By all means, if you have any questions, just drop me a message down in the comments. And I'll look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for watching the video. Take care and bye-bye.